Whatever. I'll fix that later. So, last video that I did was talking about uniques and how uniques are going to be devalued going into Season 4 of Diablo. That uniques just simply aren't worth it. And something that I wanted to discuss, something that I wanted to talk about, because I don't like to just mention, hey, this is a problem, we need to fix this, and then not have a way to fix it. So, how are we going to fix uniques going into Season 4? I got a few ideas. Now, these ideas are going to range from bullshit, nowhere near viable, all the way over to really not significant enough. Now, the core heart of the design issue on uniques is that a unique is supposed to always drop the same. That's why it can't really be customized. You can upgrade it, you can add sockets to it, and you can put gems in those sockets. That's about all you can do. You can't really customize it an insane degree. And part of the reason why they want to keep that system going forward is because a lot of the gear that you have is going to be very basic, very mundane. Like this helm is now just going to be maximum life, total armor, and like a resistance. Or the willpower. You know, it's going to be very basic. It's not going to have a lot necessarily going for it. So, because of some of the changes like that, they don't want to make it to where uniques have this insane degree of customability. However, part of the problem I think with that is that tempering is going to just give you so much more control individually over your gear. So, for example, you know, if you were to look at these gloves, let's say they keep the willpower, the overpower, and the pulverize, right? I can add on to these gloves, I can add on something like increase the maximum size of pulverize as a weapon aspect. I can add on something like lucky hit chance for poison damage if you want to make poison werebear, right? That's a build that's somewhat viable. There's things like that that you can use that will give you a relatively significant upgrade over a very common unique. And the only reason you're going to run certain uniques is because of the effects that they give you are just so strong. Like, I am going to run Insatiable Fury because it is necessary for me to keep Werebear form up all the time. I am going to run Banished Lord Talisman because my build is based around core skills and overpower, and this is a very good amulet for that. But a majority of the uniques in the game are not going to see play. I cannot fit a Xur into a build. This is a 925 item power weapon, because it's a Duriel drop. This is one of the top weapons in the game. If I have barbarians that have one-handed weapons that would love to have this. Why am I not seeing play on this? Why is this not seeing any play? Simple. It's a barbarian exclusive. I have one barbarian that actually uses the swords for damage, the two-handed weapons for damage, instead of a two-handed bludgeoning or a two-handed slasher. And it doesn't give me the stats that I want on it. So even though it's high damage, I can't afford to run it. Now, you might look at that and say, well, that's a you problem. Of course, the Xur Wrath isn't going to be a great weapon, but most of the weapons I'm running on that character are not 925. Most of the weapons I run are running lower. But because it just doesn't give me enough beneficial stats, I'm not running it. Because look at that. Non-physical damage. Barbarian doesn't have damage that's not physical. Core skill damage, that's fine, but not every barbarian needs to run a core skill build. Like, it is just not a great unique. So, what if, for a unique like this, for example, because they want to keep it a unique, why doesn't every unique have 2 of its 4 affixes that are completely locked in, they never change, and the other 2 affixes can roll from a range of affixes, say maybe 4 affixes. I'd say 4 to 6 is like what I would consider. So, What does an example of that look like? Let's look at Insatiable Fury, because I have Insatiable Fury equipped. Insatiable Fury is supposed to promote a Werebear Druid. So, let's keep the overpower damage, because Werebear overpowered. And let's keep the total armor in Werebear form. Keep those two rolls. You have physical damage, and you have damage reduction while fortified. Those two rolls can stay, but you could also roll those into something else. You could roll maximum life onto it. You could maybe roll a resistance onto it, like, say, poison resistance. Because there are a couple of random resistances that are here. Tempest Roar has poison resist. Vasilis has lightning resist. There are definitely some resistances that can roll off of uniques. So, having a larger roll range on uniques would be more beneficial. That way this also helps with the problem of farming, because there's a very limited pool of gear that you can go to farm. So if I want to go and farm materials, the eggs and the shards of agony, from Varshan and Gregor, I have to run those bosses, I have to get the materials to go fight Duriel and get shit I actually need. Here's the problem with the system. Once I have a high roll on a piece of gear that I use, I'm not going to then keep any of the other pieces of gear. I have all of this gear over here that's just sitting here accumulating dust. Why is it sitting here accumulating dust? Because I can't do anything with it. Like, it's not a higher roll than what I have, or it's not a unique I want to use. Now, if you gave uniques multiple roll ranges on affixes, so for example, you look at let me find a decent drop off of Varshan. Or Varshan or Gregor. Alright, Field of Crimson. Let's use Field of Crimson. Field of Crimson is a difficult unique to run, because bleed builds need to use their two-handed slasher in order to execute their skills. The problem with the unique is that you have to use this weapon in order to use your skills. You can't just assign your bleed skills to a bludgeoning weapon and then use a stronger bludgeoning weapon for the damage. So you have to use Field of Crimson. Now, the stats on this are okay, obviously. Two-handed damage with slashing weapons, damage over time, crit damage, rupture cooldown reduction. What I would keep the rupture cooldown reduction, and I would keep the damage over time, because it's based around rupture, it's based around bleeding. Those two would be the two I lock in. And then the range of 4 that you have the critical strike damage, obviously. You have the damage with two-handed weapons. Now, I believe I still have an older copy. Let's see if I still have the older copy. Here we go. This is the older copy before they changed it. This has ranks of rupture on it. That could be on there as well. You could have another thing for rupture attack speed. You see how you could have more ranges on this. So, as I'm farming for boss materials, I could also be farming for the perfect, quote-unquote, drop on a weapon like this. Let's say, because the rupture cooldown and the damage over time is locked in, let's say I don't want the crit damage. I don't want that, because most of my damage is going to come from damage over time. Why can't it give me damage with two-handed slashing weapons and ranks of rupture? I could keep then going through farming Fields of Crimson until I get that. Or let's say I want, a super attack speed build for no apparent reason. And I have something that has rupture attack speed as a roll I could get. That would help offset and alleviate the major problem of all of these duplicate uniques that are lower rolls, that have the exact same affixes, the exact same ranges with no variety. Now, a similar system, this would be plan number 2, when the Codex of Power gets upgraded in the upcoming patch. The way it's going to work is all the entries are going to be added to the Codex of Power. Now, the Codex currently always gives you the lowest roll possible. That's fine. And as you salvage more and more legendaries, that low roll will progressively, over time, upgrade into the highest roll possible. So you'll never have a low roll again by that system. Now, here's my problem with uniques. This is going to be twofold. Outside of Duriel, and then soon to be Andoriel in the next patch, none of the 4 bosses that you have to farm for materials, that you farm for uniques, are guaranteed to drop 925 gear, because they're not 95 or higher. Now, obviously, you can alleviate that by, oh, we'll just run the tortured version that's level 200. Let's be clear. Not all builds are going to be able to handle that level 200 boss right away. And even then, that level 200 boss requires 5 times the materials in order to fight. And to be clear, that's not going to be very cost efficient in terms of Duriel or Andoriel mats, because if I'm having to spend 5 times the living steel to go fight a tormented Gregor, but I only get 1 shard of agony out of it, that is a waste of resources right there, especially if it's going to be a difficult boss fight, and the uniques that he drops, once again, are completely random. So my system to offset this is, let's see how the Codex of Power works, and let's implement something similar. So, you have these stats on individual uniques. Uniques should have their own entries into the Codex of Power. Now, you can't craft these uniques, they have to drop from the world. But my thing is, every unique that you salvage will permanently upgrade future unique drops by one of these categories. So I'll look at this Pain Gouger's Gauntlet. Pain Gouger's Gauntlet has all stat, attack speed, critical strike chance, basic skill damage. Now, if you want to, you could leave the actual affix, like what the unique does. You could leave that at a random drop rate. I'm not saying that needs to permanently increase over time. That, to me, is fine, how it is. But those basic stats right there, if you don't want to make any changes to the unique, now those stats aren't exactly bad by any means. Basic attack, it's a basic attack build, so you want basic attack damage, you want attack speed, crit chance is okay, I guess. I mean, it really depends on what your build is going for. The all stats is kind of worthless. It's nice to have, but look at how low that range is. Like, it caps at 25 all stat. That, to me, is kind of a worthless slot. My thing is this. So if I sacrifice 5 Pain Gouger Gauntlets, each time I sacrifice one of those stats will randomly increase by a little bit. So if you look at the basic skill damage, right, the roll range is 25 to 55%. I sacrifice 1, let's say it rolls basic skill damage, so now instead of it being a 25 cap, it's a 26 cap. Or 25 floor, it's a 26 floor. Okay? Now let's say I sacrifice another one, and it increases the all stat from low roll 14, low roll 15. I sacrifice another one. Basic skill damage goes from 26 to 27. This would also help alleviate the grinding problem and the grinding frustration of farming the same boss over and over again, getting multiple copies of the same unique. They're not better copies. I'm not going to run them, and I'm salvaging them for absolutely no reason. So, you could have the ability to then re-roll multiple ranges on a unique from the first idea, or from the second idea, if you don't like that, you could permanently increase the stats on these uniques over time, similar to the Codex of Power. That would make it more of a slow progression to the perfect, if you will, unique. Third and final idea. This one is going to kind of be the most out of left field. Would be to give certain uniques affixes or abilities from other classes. Now, what do I mean by this? This is an idea that I'm stealing from Diablo 2. Because Diablo 2 had a system with rune words and with uniques in that game where they would give you skills from other classes. Most notably, everybody ran a Spirit Shield. Everybody ran a Spirit Shield. One of the best offhands in Diablo 2. One of the things that Spirit Shield gives you is it gives you +1 to teleport. It doesn't matter what class you're playing, you get access to that skill. Now, there are a lot of generic class uniques in this game. Like, they're not tied to a specific class. And 90% of these don't get run outside of Uber uniques or the absolute pinnacle of generic uniques. And by that, I'm talking about Banished Lord Talisman and Tybalt's Will. Are there any other non-uniques? Not non-uniques, non-class exclusive uniques besides Tybalt's and Banished Lords that see any widespread use? And no, I'm not counting the Ubers, right? Who the fuck is out here actively running Pain Gouger's Gauntlet into their build all the time? Who is out here actively saying, yes, I'm dying to have a Butcher Cleaver in my build? How about some of the worst offenders? Things like fucking Penitent Greaves and Mother's Embrace. How every time you seemingly run a boss and you get a unique, it ends up being Mother's Embrace or Penitent Greaves. I technically have this issue with Duriel. My Duriel luck is atrocious. I have 5 copies of Godslayer Crown, not including the 5 copies I've already salvaged. So, an example of what I mean is that all of these uniques right here see no play because they just don't have good enough stuff on them. So, Godslayer Crown is based around stun, freeze, or immobilizing an elite enemy. My thing would be this. Why does Godslayer Crown then not give it a 5th affix, right? Give it +1 to Frost Nova. And any class that can equip this can add Frost Nova to their skill bar. Now, they would not be adding Frost Nova with its upgrades. So you're not getting the mana regen, you're not getting the vulnerable, and you're not getting the cooldown reduction. You don't get any of the upgrades. You're literally getting it in its base form. That's a good idea. Because if you want people to play around it, part of the problem with Godslayer Crown is that, well, it has an internal cooldown on it for no reason. And the other part of the problem is that it doesn't actively do anything to help you set up those forms of crowd control. Which means if I'm a barbarian and I'm running this, I have to already be running Ground Stomp. If I'm a sorceress and I'm running this, I have to already be running Frost Nova. Or I have to be running other legendary aspects or other uniques to set this up. Now, there's similar things that you could do out of this. Andariel's Visage, which is the Uber unique, could maybe give you the poison imbuement off of Rogue automatically. You have Waxing Gibbous. Waxing Gibbous gives you stealth for 2 seconds. Why doesn't Waxing Gibbous give you one of the stealth skills like Shadow Step from the Rogue? Mother's Embrace. Mother's Embrace sees absolutely no play. Give it something generic defensively, or generic resource-wise. Like, give it +1 rank of Blood Howl. You know, there's so many random stats that you could actively add, where you're just giving somebody +1 rank to it, and that lets anybody from that class gain access to it, right? There's seemingly no reason why you don't have that ability, especially if you want to make uniques feel more unique, because the majority of these uniques are kind of worthless. Anyways, like I said, that would be my thoughts on the uniques and how I would be improving them going into Season 4. I hope